Welcome to a new episode of Riyada, a Wilson Center podcast about entrepreneurship in the MENA region. I'm Merissa, Khurma, co-host of the podcast and director of the Middle East program with the Wilson Center, together with Jordan-based Imad Shawa of the Howdy Arabia podcast. This month, we zoomed into all things youth and entrepreneurship, and today we will be chatting with UNICEF's youth expert at the Jordan country office, Giorgia Varisco. Jordan, akin to other countries in the MENA region, has one of the youngest populations worldwide, with, according to UNICEF, 63% of its population under the age of 30. Of course, this presents an opportunity for Jordan. Only if youth are prepped and ready to enter the workforce, but also if they're able to find jobs or to create them. But as also UNICEF notes, this youth bulge is not without its challenges. Thank you so much for joining us today, Giorgia. Looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Thank you, Merissa. And it's a pleasure to be here today.
So let's zoom into some of the work that you do in Amman concerning youth and adolescents. As we said, Jordan has a young population. The World Bank report a few months ago was alarmingly basically highlighting that Jordan's youth unemployment is at 50%. So why does Jordan continue to struggle on this front, and what does UNICEF do in collaboration, I assume, with the government and other organizations to try to address this challenge?
Thank you, Merissa. Yeah, indeed, the World Bank did paint quite a bleak picture when it comes to youth and youth unemployment. And in particular, I think you've mentioned the high level of youth unemployment, but I think for Jordan would be also really important to talk about the number of women unemployment, which also, according to the World Bank, is the highest of any country not at war. So you have sort of a double difficulties. You have the youth issues and you have the female and sort of the gender gap issue. So UNICEF, of course, is focused on addressing child rights and youth rights. And in Jordan in specific, looking at the issue of preparing young people for the world of work is, of course, very, very important. And when we say the young people in Jordan, of course, for UNICEF, we mean all vulnerable adolescents and young people who live in the country. Because we do have an approach which focuses on vulnerability, which means that we look at the issue of all youth, whether they are Jordanians or they're refugees, Syrian, Palestinian, Iraqi asylum seekers, and all the others. So when you start putting all the different lenses, the challenges become even greater, as you can just imagine. Our program does have the vulnerability focus, and we do think very much in a localized approach and looking at the situation nationwide. So we have a very adaptable intervention that may work really well, I don't know, in Man, but maybe slightly different when we're looking at addressing the issues of adolescents and youth, for example, in the refugee camps. So the programs that we support really focus on the preparedness of young people, and combines providing adolescents and youth with the right skills to be able to become, to increase employability. But of course, as part of that is related to employability, and part of that is also focused on civic engagement, which is equally important, or it's a part of the puzzle. And of course, focusing, on the life skills. So after you support them with sort of the skills, you need to provide them with the opportunity to apply those skills. And we have a number of programs which focus on social innovation, social entrepreneurship, volunteering. And then we look at really bridging the gap towards employment with more tailored programs that look at both sides, on the technical and vocational side, because as we know, I think it's 70% of the employers in Jordan are small to medium enterprises. There is a small smaller pool of, I guess, of private sector, of the bigger, larger private sector, and much of the, I guess, employment opportunity do align more with the technical and vocational training. And then we have, of course, entrepreneurship component where you support youth with access to entrepreneurship skills, but also looking at what are the bottlenecks for youth accessing entrepreneurship opportunities. So the issue of financing for enterprises. So it's not just a mindset, it's a financing. And then hands-on support to enterprises. And in a nutshell, this is what UNICEF does together with a multitude of partners from, of course, the government, but also CBOs and NGOs and royal foundations.
So you touched upon so many different topics that I know Imad and I want to dig into, but I just want to home into one thing that you mentioned before we get into the details of entrepreneurship, which is technical and vocational education / training. I am sure that this came up in your work and this came up in our research, not only in Jordan, but across the MENA region. There is this shame culture associated with technical and vocational jobs. But the sector itself needs a lot of work, particularly institutions that are run by the public sector. But we're also seeing some public sector educational entities or hybrid models, such as the Hussein Technical University or Luminous College, that are really trying to reform and revolutionize technical education, like make it attractive, make it, inviting not just for young people, but for their families, who in many cases have a lot to say about their children's trajectory in life. So how do you see this progressing from your perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a very large topic, I guess, to address, because it cannot be. I think when it comes to TVET, it's not an there is not one answer, right? It's a big puzzle, and there's loads of pieces to it, which you've highlighted some. So first is looking, as you mentioned, about the quality of TVET and how this is in Jordan. And I think it's to be fair to say that the quality could be improved. And I know that there is a lot of work that is actually happening now to really focusing on TVET. I know the reform has been going on for decades, but I think in the last year, the TVET has become really critical and seen as an important aspect to modernize the economy in Jordan. So you've seen, for example, that the government established, with the support, I think, of the ILO, the TVSDC, which is really looking at a skills framework reform, which is looking at professionalizing the sectors. And of course, these things will take time, right? So it's not going to be an overnight solution, but I think these are the right steps towards the right direction. In parallel to this, of course, there is a work that the Vocational Training Center are doing, and how can the Vocational Training Center offer quality degree that connects with the private sector, that provides opportunity, but also to ensure that these are safe, where girls feel safe to go, and where family feel being a safe place for their kids, that do provide opportunities to them. So there is this other piece of the puzzle. And then the mindset issue. So again, you cannot address it in isolation, right? So until you have the sort of the reform more, a few more years into it, where you can start seeing the quality and the outcome of some of the changes that are making, I think it's going to be very difficult to change a mindset overnight. We're actually working with the Ministry of Labor at the moment. We're in a very interesting work together with an organization which is called Behavioral Insight, which really looks at what are the nudges that we need to start focusing on when we start when we want to work with families and teachers and youth, and start talking about the opportunities that the technical and vocational sector could bring to youth. And we know those are not just jobs, because we know there are some jobs available there. So it's not just an opportunity for jobs, but it's also an opportunity of entrepreneurship, for example. And the digital, I guess, transformation is another huge opportunity. So there are opportunities that I think are being looked at, and collectively between the government and all the supporting institutions, I think there is really a strong momentum to try to see how we can enhance and turn TVET into something that young people will feel proud of attending, and will see it's a worthwhile, I guess, sector to pursue. And you mentioned Luminous and H2U, and I think those two private sector really are helping, showing what the possibilities are. When, I don't know if you've been to Luminous, I've been to Luminous many times, but when you go there, the place is stunning. Everything is shining. Everything is the best of the best. You're not just doing, car engineering. You're doing the hybrid, Bosch, top of the class, really ahead of, many centers that I may have also seen in Europe. And in my 5 years that I've been here, what was interesting is that when we speak to adolescents, we're starting hearing girls or even boys that are saying in focus group discussion, oh, I really would like to go to Luminous to become a chef, for example. So, and this is starting to really change the mindset for sure of the young people. And I guess, slowly will trickle down probably to also the families, which we know are an important voice and have important decision-making power in the life of a young person in Jordan.
Just a comment to say that I wholeheartedly agree about the feeling you get when you enter Luminous. And yeah, families always need time, which is okay.
Thanks, Giorgia. Yeah, tying into entrepreneurship.
Okay.
Has there been any, or maybe on the way in the pipeline, any macro reforms that maybe the Jordanian government is doing to improve the options for youth becoming entrepreneurs?
I think the macro level reforms, I haven't seen them yet. There is this new vision, the economic modernization vision, which talks about a bigger vision and a strategy. I think it's good to see sort of the reforms that may come out as a result of that. But I think having macroeconomic policy for Jordan will be very, very important to really also provide sustainability to some of the reforms that are being made. And when it comes to entrepreneurship, the experience that I have is that there's been lots of investments made, especially prior to COVID. And I know that the social entrepreneurship reform policy is still sitting within the parliament. And I think it'd be really interesting to see whether, once that goes through, the impact that it will have on the sector. From my experience, UNICEF has been partnering with the Ministry of Labor and with the Royal Court on a program which is called Imad, which provides entrepreneurship, it's a really good program on entrepreneurship training that help entrepreneurs really understand whether the idea they had or the enterprise idea they had works or not, and put forward through a feasibility study, which is done by first IRADA and then the banks, a new entrepreneurship plan, and then provides through the central bank loans to young people included, which are underwritten, so provide some sort of safety guards for the youth. And they have a very good rate. I think it's around 4% interest rate, with the possibility of then getting the interest back once you pay off the loan. And this program has been implemented for the last 2 years or 3 years now. And what was interesting is that in our conversation with the banks that have given the loans to the youth, because there is so much focus on youth, the banks have also started to understand what it means to loan to youth, where are the opportunities, which is something which is, if you're a young person, getting a loan bank to start an enterprise is very, very difficult in this country. So I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done. But again, I think the ambition is there. Jordan realized, people have realized that in Jordan, just employment, like finding a job it's not the answer. You have to be your own job creator if you want opportunities, because the market is not able to employ or continue to employ the graduates that are coming out of university, let alone Tawjihi only. So focusing on entrepreneurship, I think it's important and needs to continue to be looked at, both from a policy perspective, and I know the World Bank is doing a lot of work around this, but also from a private sector perspective, and also really preparing young people to take the leap of faith if they can and start their journey in entrepreneurship.
Okay, so Inhad, which means arise, I guess, and flourish in Arabic. It's great that it's focusing on something that Merissa and I have always, I guess, been hearing about, which is difficulty in raising and getting access to financing, even for established, mature, non-youth entrepreneurs. So yeah, I could imagine that the problem is much deeper with youth. Is this program, how widespread is it? How many people does it actually touch?
Yeah, no, it's a nationwide program. Of course, we're talking about entrepreneurship and it's connected with the banks. So in this case, it's supporting Jordanian only. But there are over 100 million dinars available for startups. So it's not a small program. I think we've supported over close to 2,000 startups to receive loans. And again, I think what's interesting about this program is you moving from a grant approach, which used to happen quite a bit, to a more, I'm not saying that those that take grants don't feel the accountability, but here you're getting a loan. So you're really learning how to be accountable to the commitments you've made. Plus, you have the opportunity of getting the interest rate back, which is also, I think, an added bonus at the end. So if you are successful in it, you have advisors that help you start your business, support you throughout your business. You have the cash to start it, and you have basically an interest-free loan in the end. So, but again, it's not easy. But through the program, we have supported some really interesting enterprises. For example, one is a medium enterprise in Man. So it was already an established enterprises who used the grant to grow its business. And now it's the largest, they do production of paper cups in Man. So it's amazing. You go to Man and you have this really big business, and they produce cups from Jordan and probably now outside of Jordan. But then you also have sort of the smaller realities in Aqaba. There is this woman who managed to get the loan from the bank, and she opened the first women-led bakery in Aqaba. And with the earnings that she made through the business, and she opened it before COVID, she's now sending 2 of her kids to medical school in Egypt. So and she's a woman who was married at 14 and struggled throughout her life. So you have some really, really, diverse but super interesting and powerful stories coming out of this program.
Thank you so much for sharing more, particularly about those who have been through Inhad. And for our audience, Ma'an in particular is an interesting case in Jordan because it's traditionally been or historically been associated with very high unemployment, and a lot of the riots and some of the political instability actually starts in Oman due to a lot of these socioeconomic pressures. So you mentioned a lot of the training programs. I'm glad to hear that some of the beneficiaries are also already established smaller businesses or medium ones that are, getting loans to grow. The challenge of scale has been basically popping up in a lot of our discussions amongst entrepreneurs, not just in Jordan, but across the MENA region. But we recently heard from one of our guests that it's also the trainings and the workshops that are available that are primarily focused on the pre-seed and, seeding phases. And that those who are, on the cusp of growing need sort of more mentorship and maybe different training.
Yeah.
And so it seems that there is redundancy in some of those training programs that are being offered by, a plethora of organizations, either international or local. So how do you think this particular problem can be addressed?
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I mean, I think you can go online and you would see that you can find so many trainings that are offering similar things at startups that are a similar level. And I think what's interesting is that if you're already well established, you have places where you can go to really grow your business. And I'm thinking about sort of the bigger funders and supporters at 1 million plus. You can find loads of organizations that do support. But when it comes to sort of this side of the sort of the smaller startup and initiatives, you have a lot of training, but not a lot of either access to the financial aspect to start the business, and as you say, the mentorship and the support that we know it's so critical, especially in the first 12 to 18 months, and somebody starts a business, because it's the likelihood they're gonna go bust or they're gonna close is really, it will happen within that time frame. So the hands-on support needs to happen after they receive the initial seed funding, and should not stop there, right? And that's what's missing. We're working with, I think, again, because social entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship has been a focus of a lot of effort in the last few years. They're now really, I think, there is this organization, and I forgot the name and I can look it up, and we're partnering with them where they're trying to do sort of a mapping of exactly this. So when we talk about entrepreneurship, what is the landscape analysis? And it's really, I know there was one done, I think in 2017, but post-COVID, it's a different reality. So this, I think, will be really helpful to understand where the overlaps are, where everybody's focusing, to allow to provide a more diversified range of support that can help the startup ecosystem at different stages. So I hope this, from UNICEF, we're also looking forward to receiving this analysis so we can better understand where our niche is in terms of focusing, where we may want to change what we're currently doing, because it's already, as you say, oversubscribed in a way by lots of other organizations. So I think throughout all the sectors, really looking at this enhanced coordination would be really, really important, because there are a lot of, we are saying, and UNICEF is saying, and we're experiencing it, that we are seeing a decrease on overseas development assistance, which is impacting our program. But to be fair, there is still quite a significant amount of funding coming in, or funding that is coming into the government with direct budgetary support. So increasing the coordination and understanding where the gaps are, I think, will be very important to make things more efficient and effective.
And in terms of the other point that you mentioned earlier in your introduction, which is basically the lowest female participation, labor participation rate. It is what the World Bank calls the MENA paradox, that basically you have highly educated women in many countries around the region, be it in the GCC or North Africa or the Levant. Women are outperforming men in tertiary education. But then in a country like Jordan and in other countries, to a lesser extent, we're not seeing that shift to the workforce. And we know what the challenges are because I think they're very similar in the different settings. But if we zoom into Jordan, how can some of these challenges be addressed? Because you have technical ones like transportation, but then you have mindsets, which is a much longer process.
Yeah. I mean, of course, in Jordan, you have the social and gender norms that are impacting these results for sure, as well as more the practical aspect, like you've mentioned, like transportation, which in Jordan is very critical because of how the geography is, right? And then also, you've seen the government has tried to move forward around the nursery and the flexible working, but still, regardless of all this changes, it's still not necessarily translating into greater employment opportunity. And then also the other aspect is the mindset, the families, and also the fact that there is a lot of genderization of work. So, you have certain sectors that it's perceived as a woman or a girl you may not be able to be in, and others you can. So again, limiting even more some of the choices. Like everything I said today, there isn't like one fit all solution. To address this, you need to look at it from multiple perspectives. At policy level, what are the policies that the government needs to put in place to help address some of the more technical barriers as you referred to? There needs to be a lot of work coming in from a probably social behavioral science perspective and how to start shifting the mindset, and then ensuring that there are, what I think COVID has taught us is there are opportunities, and there are huge opportunities within the digital sector that girls and women can benefit from, because do address or tackle some of those barriers that that girls face. So the home-based work opportunities are there. So looking at the digital sector as an opportunity also, but not exclusively, of course, for girls. So again, we would need to look at everything from multi-layered, I guess, in a multi-layered approach. Just to give you an example from what is it that we're doing in UNICEF is, first of all, we're starting young, and we start and teaching girls about employability from the ages of 10 and above, and ensure that girls are available of the different girls and boys are aware of the different opportunities that could be available for them in terms of future opportunities, and also the skills that are needed. So ensure you build the skills, because although you have great attainment results within school, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have the right skill set for the private sector. So this is something else that needs to be addressed. But then in the journey is really giving them the opportunity to try those sectors, or to practice their skills learned. And then we're focusing a lot, particularly with girls, with supporting them with home-based businesses where possible, supporting them. We have a very strong digital skills program that help create freelancer within the gig economy. So looking at where the opportunities are. What I can tell you is that although COVID has had, again, a negative impact on some of the achievement made, so particularly around girls and employment, I think because the economic situation is tough and COVID has made it tougher, we have seen how more families, more husbands are now willing to to look at what are the options for allowing either the daughter or the wife to work. So we've seen that is starting to happen. So start changing some of the. So it almost seems like the need is helping us move the needle around the gender norms a bit. But I think, like anything, it's looking at the multiple lenses that you need to address when looking at the girls and women employment, ensuring that you're engaging with all the stakeholders, which is not necessarily just the girl, because sometimes she may not be the decision maker. So whether it is the family or the husband, so the work needs to happen at family level, at community level, and of course at individual level. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, absolutely. You did. And we've interviewed women entrepreneurs, most recently Imad and I from Egypt, that discussed many of these challenges.
Yeah. And Giorgia, you mentioned a statistic that was a bit alarming for Jordan specifically. Was it that out of the countries that are not at war, female unemployment is the most, it's highest in Jordan? Was that the stat?
Yeah, that's from the World Bank. Is a statistic from the World Bank is maybe 6 months old. So I don't think things have changed much since.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not surprised that it's severe. I'm currently involved in the private sector. I'm actually outside of Amman in an area called Sahab. I'm in a company where this branch that I'm in has about 50 employees and 0 women out of 50. I mean, the neighborhood is very rough. It's far out. It's transportation is very sketchy. And like you said, it's a confluence of so many factors, which includes cultural norms and distance and transportation, and it's just like a perfect storm for this to be the case. It's almost as if that the private sector has to make an extra effort and educate themselves on the benefits of having at least some women in an established, mature business that traditionally hasn't had anyone like the one I'm talking about. And I'm not sure that there are very visible resources, or maybe you could point to them for business for male-dominated business owners and policy. Maybe even HR managers in male-dominated businesses. Where can they look to understand that this is not just a quota issue where it's going to look nice that there's 10 women out of 50, but it's more of like an actual benefits. Even if it's not short term for the organization, but maybe even for the community.
Yeah, no, you're right. There isn't yet a lot available to them, particularly that is relevant like to the Jordanian context. The World Economic Forum just launched last year in partnership with MOPIC, UNICEF, Bank Etihad, and other private sector, an accelerator, which is called Closing the Gender Gap Accelerator, which really looks at what are the catalytic factors that can help spearhead this change in Jordan. And the Women Business Association is helping with the coordination and is doing a lot of groundwork. So they started with some interesting research. It's available on their website or on the World Economic Forum website. And now there is a plan, a work plan, which looks at policies, which looks at reform that are needed to really start changing the direction or the trajectories. And I think what's really interesting is that, for example, Bank Etihad is part of it, and the CEO, of course, is very, she's a woman and very passionate about this issue. So looking at how private sector to private sector can demonstrate the importance of having, a more a more gender balanced, as you say, company where both women and men are working. So I think it's important that this message comes from private sector that have been able to enact policies and put in place systems that would allow for that. I'm mentioning Bank Etihad, but I think also Zain, for example, has a nursery within their own offices to ensure that, it's parents, because it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the women or the mother, but parents can, more easily come to work after having had children because the nursery is there. So there are some interesting examples. And through the World Economic Forum with this accelerator, I think there is a lot of hope in trying to shine the spotlight on these issues and demonstrate solutions that could be applied more across the country.
If I may just comment on one thing, you mentioned that Al Ittihad Bank CEO is a woman. And I think it makes a difference when we see more women in leadership positions, because that's how change starts to also slowly permeate the cultures of these organizations.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good example of how it makes a difference when you have women in leadership positions, and how they can also exert their influence and authority to be part of the solution.
Yeah.
So, Giorgia, what message do you have for Jordanian youth, both men and women, on International Youth Day, which was a few days ago?
It's a good time to also give this message, because I think Tawjihi results were just announced yesterday. So a lot of young people are looking at their future. And I think what I would say is, there are a lot of interesting opportunity out there. The most important thing is you need to try to pursue them, and don't give up. And I know it's a tough time. We're all experiencing it. COVID really made the world a little bit tougher for all of us. But there are a lot of opportunities, and continue trying, and you will be able to succeed in the end.
Thank you. Thank you so much. A very positive message. And for our listeners, the Tawjihi exam is the final exam of the 12th year in high school. So it's a very big deal in Jordan and in other countries in the region. Giorgia, thank you so much for your time and your insight.
Thank you.
And we look forward to continuing the discussion with you and many of your colleagues in the sector.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Giorgia, and good luck with further work.
Thank you.
This podcast is funded by a grant from the United States Department of State. The opinions, findings, and conclusions of this podcast are those of our guests and do not necessarily reflect those of the United States Department of State.